This week on the Sports Initiative podcast, I sit down with former England schoolboy Marvin Brown. Bristol City's youngest ever appearance maker discusses his transition from schoolboy into professional football, his experiences of playing professional football, as well as his transition into the coaching world. I hope you enjoy. Good. So Marv, how are things?
Good. Really good in general. Home life's good. Coaching's good. More on the course as well, which I did last week. ECAS Elite Premier League Elite Coach Apprenticeship Scheme. So we're just up in Brecon Beacons for 3 days, walking over mountains and doing activity. So yeah, good fun.
Yeah. So I know you mentioned before what I knew you were going on that and whatnot, and I said to you to save the stories and stuff, kind of until we got on here. So. What was it that you actually did? How was it? And all that type of stuff.
So this is the last of our 2-year course, Premier League ECAS course. It's more around developing yourself as an individual. So like professional skills as well as some theory around coaching. It's not necessarily a coaching course, even though everyone on there is a football coach in an academy. So this was the last one. A lot of it built up to this. So it was around decision making and leadership in extreme conditions. So the sort of premise of this was, which we know now, we didn't know before, was to make us absolutely shattered the first day physically, and then the second day have lots of different tasks where decision making was more important. So it wasn't necessarily physically draining the second day, but mentally sort of stressful and draining. So there are 24 of us there. We're in groups of 8, so we went off in our own. Like I was in the red team. So first day, we get there in the afternoon. We get shown different sort of army skills that you'll need. So whether it was just how to put up a tent, the rations, your food, and actually how to cook it and make it safe and those types of things. How to use a gun. It was actually a paintball gun, but it was. They said it was very realistic to the type of gun that they would use and those types of things. So just your normal army sort of training. They said they try and teach us in 3 hours what would take them usually a 6-month block from somebody from the street to actually be able to go and be called to any country to go and fight. And then at, I think it was around 5-6 o'clock, we were told in our regiment, essentially, in our group, we had a call. There was a pilot who had been downed. He was safe. The beacon that he had been set off, or whatever wording you would use. So we had the coordinates, and we had to then come up with a plan with contingencies if things went wrong to go and retrieve him safely. And so they assigned 2 leaders for us. And then we had to basically come up with a plan. So we did that, and we did the most straightforward plan, which was we had a 4x4 that we could access. It was literally, right, work out the coordinates, drive up to where he is, pick him up, come back. We weren't naive enough to think that would be how it worked, but we thought we'd keep it really simple and not try to overthink it. So we were the last group to go out, and 2 groups had gone ahead of us. We're in the 4x4, we go up, we've got a leader he was from the armed forces. So just so we couldn't get lost or anything too bad happen. And we got up to where the coordinates were of the pilot, or a few yards away. And there's a lady in front of us like waving her arms. At this point we're not aware that this is part of the actual assignment we've got. And so our team leader, who was driving, looks out the window and said, everything okay? She said, look, my car's just broken down. Do you mind just having a look and coming to help? He said, yeah, no problem. At the same time, suddenly out of nowhere, completely out of nowhere, loud bangs on the window. You look out and it's dark at this point. So we didn't go out till around 9 o'clock, 9:30. So bangs on the window, lots of swearing, which I won't repeat now. People with these head masks on and stuff, and open a door and basically just it was felt like a terrorist hostage taking sort of thing, and it was very realistic. Threw you on the side, chucked your bags out. So we're all there on our knees, hands behind our back in a line. At this point, I'm thinking, right, this has got to be now part of. I'm praying this is now part of the course actually, and this hasn't actually happened. And it was really funny because it was the first part where you sort of saw people's characteristics or personalities come out. So 2 along from me, there's a guy, I won't say his name because he'll be embarrassed. But they're saying, right, keep your hands down, don't look at us, don't make any eye contact, make sure you don't look at us. And I see his hand start to go up. So we've been told to keep him behind our head. His hand starts to go up in the air. And I just hear, excuse me, can we just talk about this? So I'm there trying my hardest not to laugh. And the guys in not so nice tones were, look, put your hands down or it's going to get blown off. And he slowly just puts his hand back down. And suddenly they take the car and they speed off. So then they quite soon we realised the pilot wasn't there anymore. And so it was basically get back to base. So we've been driving for 40 minutes. So we had to, so our leader spoke to us about, right, what's the plan? How are we going to get back? So we can go back on the road, but that's going to take us hours and hours and hours, because we also went around the houses to get to where we were. Or it was walk in a straight line along the map. But essentially that was over a mountain, Brecon Beacon. So we advised to go that way, and we did, and we ended up walking for 5 hours through the night. Got back at 2:30. I've really skipped over a bit of walking on really, really narrow ledges at the top of a mountain with it snowing. We had a lady in our group who was struggling to get up the mountain, so we were taking it in turns with her bag to make sure she got across, and had lots of different checkpoints looking things. So essentially got back at 2:30, and then at 5:30, went to sleep at 2:30. At 5:30, loud bang. They come running in. Right, there'll be an attack. Everybody up, pack your bags. So like, right, 3 hours sleep after a 5-hour walk. We all went into some room, and they said, right, the first part of your test is done. You've now got 45 minutes to go back, clean up. But there were no showers or anything like that, so it was basically just put on some new clothes and another set of overalls, have some breakfast, cook it, have your breakfast, and so on, and move on to the next task. So at this point, everyone's shattered, as you can imagine. And then throughout the day, we had a series of different tasks where each of us took either what they call commander or second in command. So the first task was to protect the villagers around the base where we were. So we had come under attack. We had to make sure we protected the villagers. So we were asked to go down to a marketplace where there was a suspicious package. So halfway down, it wasn't too far, maybe 200 yards away. We're walking down a path, and maybe we've gone 100, 150 yards, we hear a really loud bang again and a big puff of smoke. So we go running down. The leader takes a lead. He asks me to stay back and make sure no one else can come in to where we were. And then a few minutes later, because I couldn't see anything at this point, because my role was just to protect the gateway. But there was a lady down there. Obviously, it was role play. Her arm had been blown off. And then the day before, we had done some first aid. So it was around actually how we managed her. How did we get her back up to the ambulance, call the ambulance, all those sort of things. So again, this was the first one. So we just had 3 hours sleep. Just had, some of us had breakfast, some of us just had peanuts and things like that, because we didn't have time for everybody to cook all of their food. So we had to deal with that, get the lady in the ambulance, and you could see some real mistakes that you probably wouldn't have made the day before. So for example, I walked back down then after she had gone in the ambulance, and like, guys, have you realised her arm's still in a puddle? So it was a plastic arm. I was like, I'm assuming we should have probably brought that up with her. They may have been able to save it or something like that, but just with your mind's racing and no sleep, sort of those types of those types of mistakes happened sort of throughout the day. Brought down further, we realised a pilot had been taken hostage, was on the other side of a river. We needed to negotiate with the militia to get him back. So we had, on our side of the river, there were these chemicals that could clean water. He didn't have any water, so it was right, if we get these across to you, you give us back the pilot. And it was around certain chemicals couldn't go together, so we had to get one across the river and then back and swap them over. And again, a screaming lady who's shouting at the militia leader as we're trying to negotiate, and all of those types of things. So really, really good experience. It went from that to the next one was, we had to go and kill a terrorist. So we had to do an ambush. And so that all got planned, and then it was all paintballs, and we had to go up and work as a team to get up there stealthily and then wait for him to do a particular thing, which was touch a bin, which had lots of documents in. As soon as he touched it, then we could fire, and they returned fire and things like that, which was next. My one was next, so I was the second in command for the control room, so operations room, which is a brilliant task. I loved it. It was my favourite task of the whole thing. Everybody else on the whole course hated it, which is interesting. Essentially, we were in a room. We had different people. So someone was in charge of logistics, somebody was in charge of security, and so on. And different things would come up on a screen, and they would say, for example, there's been an earthquake, and because of that, there's landslides. At the same time, there's been an attack here. So how are we going to get the ambulance to the people who have been hurt, as well as making sure they don't go down the landslide route? And it was mapped, and just trying to sort all that out and going back and forth to everybody. I thought it was brilliant. I loved it. It felt like a bit of a computer game, essentially. And then the last one we had was the scenario was there was a bomb in a room that we couldn't go in. It was too dangerous to send any of us in, so we had to move robots around and pick up the bomb and put it in a particular area where then it could be disposed of and so on. And that was the final one of the day. Between each one, we had to give feedback to whoever was leading out of us, our other coaches. And it was a really good exercise, just around the leader had to say what they wanted to work on, and then we had to give specific feedback to that rather than general feedback. And you also couldn't repeat what anybody else has said. So if you're at the end of the line, you really had to think about what you could offer. And if the answer was, I can't offer anything else, then it was that, which I found really good, and something I'm considering and another thing from this course really that I'll bring back and try to implement in some way with regards to giving feedback. And then on the last day, which was Friday, with sort of fresh minds, we were allowed to sleep in a bed on Thursday night, and we had a nice meal on Thursday evening. Friday was just a wrap up and a load of feedback. We're going to actually get feedback from our main leader, around how we led, and how well we completed our own individual challenges. So we had to set 3 challenges. So mine, for example, I'm no good in the cold, so I feel the cold. I always want the heating on. Everyone else in the office wants to open windows and things. So mine was to be able to still motivate myself and others in cold conditions. It was, what's my second one? My second one was offering logical, strategic plans, again in extreme conditions and so on. And I had one more, so we'll get feedback from basically the company Fieri, who are the army people, who will give us that feedback. And then we've got an assignment, 1,500 word assignment on how we felt like we did and what we'll use in the future and how we prepared for it and those types of things. So yeah, a long-winded way, but it was brilliant experience.
Is there anything from like a personal perspective that surprised yourself, or either in a positive or negative way?
For me, not necessarily surprised, but I really wanted to. My main thing was I'm quite a chilled personality. I don't really get flustered by things. I think I try to put everything into perspective. So when things seem to be falling down around me, I can kind of bring myself back to and find positives in everything. And I thought actually this will be a really good opportunity for me to see actually, could you do this under lots of pressure? So it wasn't the same type of pressure, but I was thinking potentially in a first team environment, and when you need to win the next couple of games to keep your job, or that type of pressure. But in this scenario, it was more it was going to be whatever the extreme thing was, and had to make clear decisions. My feedback from the group was I was probably the one in the group that kept everybody else going and stayed the most sort of level. It wasn't too high or too low at any point, and that just probably confirmed to me that I can and could do it in an extreme environment, which really pleased me, because I didn't know, and I suppose you don't know until you know. And so that was probably the one thing I took away, was actually, in extremes you can remain calm and you can be that level head when things become difficult.
I guess it's interesting as well. Obviously, you're working in a group, and I imagine you know most of the people in there, but not as in well enough to go and have a pint with or something like that all the times.
Yeah.
So you're probably seeing a group dynamic of people's personalities being really extenuated. And like you said, for a first team environment, that probably shows you that actually, from the outside looking in, you just see as a bunch of first team players, they must all get along, they must be quite similar. There's probably great differences in their makeup and how you'd manage them as groups.
Yeah, I think for me it's two things really. It's self-awareness and empathy. I think in any team in that environment, I think that they are two really, really important things. So knowing yourself and knowing how you might react to certain things and why will help you either not get to that breaking point by stepping away before, or having a conversation with someone and asking for help and so on. And then just empathy for everybody else, and not thinking, again, it's the same in the team, in like a football environment, but in this scenario it saw people flagging. So without that empathy, I think it would be easy to say, why are they not working as hard as I am? And actually there was no task where everybody excelled, there was no task where any individual excelled in all of them and needed more support or needed to take a back step and push someone else forward. I think that's the same as any team. Without that, without self-awareness, knowing yourself, I don't think you can then necessarily ask for that support or know when it's going to be needed, sort of preempt it. And the other way, without the empathy, I think it can become almost a selfish environment, and I'm going to do the bits I like and not do the bits I don't, or won't take ownership for everything, and get a blame culture and those things. So for me, I think we agreed beforehand as well that self-awareness and empathy would be really, really important.
Is that something you've always had, or is that something as you've got older, you've got better with?
On this course, the first was the first or second residential, so we have 6 a year. Like usually 3-day residential. On the first one, we had to do emotional intelligence tests, and on that, the first one, it kind of, I feel like so the short answer to that is I think I've always had a lot of empathy, not necessarily self-awareness, and that I scored really highly on that within my emotional intelligence, but I never really had a word for it, and everything on that was not that assertive in general. So when we did the test, and you get a sentence or a paragraph underneath each one to explain what it means, and I was reading it and I was like, this is just me in a nutshell. It was really accurate in my opinion, and the empathy one wasn't something I'd really thought about as a word, but I just knew if we had a trialist come to the club, you might know what it's like. Usually they're taking a mick out of, and football sometimes a real horrible environment. So if you're talking about as a scholar and things, and a trialist come doesn't know anyone, I always gravitated towards them, and I always felt bad, and I'd always try and help them through the process. Footballers know that anyone comes in, if they're in your position, right, that it's essentially a threat. It's this person's going to come, and now I've got less chance of playing. But I never saw it that way. I would just try to help any trialist or anyone who looked like they were in a vulnerable position. Didn't know why, didn't know what it was growing up. And it's probably only, 18 months ago when I had my first residential, and I was like, I could just remember, like on reflection, I could think of times in the past when I showed that characteristic without knowing why. I just felt bad for him and wanted to help him, essentially. So looking back, I can see that I've had that for a long time, but it's only recently I've really been able to say, yeah, and probably because I haven't really thought about it before. We were forced to, and with the EI test score, EQ test, we for me it just sort of made me have a word that I could put to the feeling.
It's interesting because it kind of, like you said, almost goes against the grain of what football is known as. It's known as quite a ruthless and quite a full-on thing, like you said, where players will get onto people, come in their position, they identify they're a threat, so like get rid of the young ones. It's quite interesting that kind of going against the grain with that. When you were a scholar and stuff, did you get any comeback off the back of acting like that, or was it?
I think so. At times, I think it was seen as quite a soft characteristic, essentially. Now, don't get me wrong, I was involved in the banner as much as the next one, but I just think I would probably know when to stop, and that sort of social awareness of being able to read that someone's actually quite uncomfortable in this scenario, and just things like that. So I don't really feel like I got, not to any extreme, but I think it was noticed by others that I was a little bit different in those scenarios. But yeah, I was probably looking back in the in crowd, so it was, you just kind of got away with it, not out of anything other than being a good footballer who always played up and stuff. So I think people just like you because of it, if that makes sense.
That identity of being one of the better, ones in the group, which will help. I guess obviously some people listening to this might not know kind of your background in terms of where you played and how successful you were with that. Mm-hmm. Can you just talk us through kind of, obviously you're growing up in terms of football, other sports, if you played other sports, and then kind of how you transitioned into where you ended up?
Okay, so my older brother, Marvin Brown, is 3 years older than me. He joined Bristol City, I think, when he was 8. So I say joined, it was a centre of excellence then. And so I think I joined when I was 8, so I think he must have been under 11s, and I was having a kickabout on the side of training with my dad, and someone, oh, he looks all right, and we'll try and see if you can join in. That's sort of how it worked back then. I'm 36 now, so yeah, it's a long time ago. And I joined in, and sort of that was it then. I was part of the academy or the equivalent back then, from 8 years old. Always did well, was just probably what you would call a natural, as in didn't really struggle at many points through my schoolboy years. I was fortunate enough under 15s to represent England, so I played for England schoolboys. Ended up playing, I think it was 22 games between under 15s and under 18s. Also fortunate enough to make my first team debut at 16, and I think it's still the youngest ever for Bristol City. And from then, I think I started to probably 16, 17. I started to have my first real challenges. I played up an age group, 2 age groups throughout, and yes, I'll have bad games and so on, but I'd never really felt challenged properly until I was sort of 17, and that was a mixture of something we spoke about before. So probably first recognised it when I had Tony Pulis gave me my debut when I was 16, and his information to me was, I've seen what you've done in the youth team, I've seen what you've done in the reserves, go and play the free flowing off the cuff flair type game that you play, and if I need you to do something different at any point, I'll let you know. And for me, that was amazing. My brother was in the first team as well, so going up and playing with him was brilliant for the family and so on. So that was amazing. And then Tony Pulis left at the end of that season, and Danny Wilson came in, and he was very, very different. And it was very prescriptive, as in how he wanted me to play as a forward or as a winger. And it was very much, when X gets the ball, I want you to be here. Then when you get it, I want you to pass to him, and then I want you to make this run. And he didn't really take to me, but accountability wise, I didn't really do what he asked. I continued to play with flair, and if I saw something different, I would do it, or I would try it. Whether it came off or not, it wasn't the team plan. So now as a coach, I can see why that might be frustrating for a manager at the time. I was like, well, hold on, I've just played a through ball and move in, or I've assisted or whatever. But I think my style of play, my natural style of play, didn't match with how he wanted us to play as a team. And so didn't play that many games, or when I did, it was 5 minutes here and 10 minutes there at the end of the game. If we needed a goal or something like that, just throw on an attacker. And then at 19, I went second half of the season. Bobby Gould was a manager at Cheltenham Town, and I went to Cheltenham in January from then to the end of the season, and probably had my best within the professional career, because I got released at 21. So played quite a few games between then and the end of the season, and he was very much like Tony Pulis. Like, I've seen what you've done, I know what you can do. Things like, when I first got, he said, you're going to play the first 5 games, no matter how well or bad you play. I believe in you, you're going to play. And for me, just someone having that confidence in you just instilled it in myself. Then it just came out, and I feel like I did well. Played quite a few games that season, mostly as a winger. And then Cheltenham wanted to take me on a free at the end of the season, but I had 1 year left at Bristol City, and the club decided that they wanted to keep me for that final year. I think I only ended up playing maybe 1 game in that final year, and in that time Bobby Gould had lost his role at Cheltenham. Like it is in football, it's circumstance. Yeah, it's just circumstance, and so I got released at the end of that season. Looking back, I think, I don't like using the word, but I think there may have been some type of depression for a few months or similar. Again, it's a long time ago, and this is probably on reflection, but didn't really want to do anything, really leave my room or do whatever. Again, I'd been at Bristol City from 8. Came as a little bit of a surprise when I got released as well, just because they didn't allow me to leave on a free the year before. I thought, oh, okay, they must want me or want to give me more time or whatever. So it did come as a little bit of a surprise, which looking back, maybe it should have. I didn't play many games that last year. And then so I got released in the summer. To Christmas, I didn't do too much. And my friend Kevin Amanko had joined the Oval Town, and it was Gary Johnson, Lee Johnson's father, who was the manager there, asked me to come along. I did a trial, I did quite well. Then they signed me till the end of the season, and again played a couple of games, not loads. I went there really unfit, so it was the first couple of months was really trying to get up to full speed, and then had a decision at the end of that season whether to go back there and fight for a place, or fight for a contract, I should say. Or at the time, I was offered something by Forest Green, who were going full time, and decided to go and try and pursue something with Forest Green, and that didn't sort of work out in the end. So I went and did a non-league circuit. At the same time, I started coaching. So Tony Pulis, one of the coaches, I can't remember his exact role then at Bristol City, had asked me to get involved in the academy, and I was adamant as soon as I got released. I was like, no, I don't want to be a coach. It's nothing. So I've never really thought of it. I was going to be a footballer, and that was it. I was, why would I want to go and coach? And when I went into the non-league circuit, I joined Western-super-Mare, and I was there for a few years and started coaching in the academy, trying to get a feel for it. Didn't get paid or anything like that. Even though I'd played for the first team and come out, it was almost just earning your stripes and getting that that experience, and I was happy to do that at that point. Did a bit of gym instructing as well while I was at Weston-super-Mare, and then had a couple of good seasons, and then Salisbury City were towards the top of the Conference South, and they bought me from Weston, so joined Salisbury, got promoted into the conference. Had a year in a conference. During this sort of time, I had started my own coaching company called Total Pro Soccer with two other coaches. Trevor Chalice, who's now the under-18s manager at Bristol City, and Dave McGibbon, who was he still is a teacher now, but he's a coach at Bristol City as well. And so the three of us started a company. A couple of years in, because at the time Trevor Chalice was head of youth recruitment, I think, and then he got a full-time coaching role, so he couldn't commit to the company anymore. When Dave got in full-time teaching, he couldn't, so I just took it on myself. That's still going now and going well. But yeah, I joined Salisbury, had a good few years there, really good fun. I found it difficult because it was trying to think, right, I'm maybe 26 now. Do I want to still pursue a football career? And the coaching seems to be taking off, and I seem to be doing well and enjoying it more and more and more. Do I want to go on that route? And eventually, I stopped focusing so much on the playing and more on the coaching. I think I was 28 then when I officially retired to a point and just stopped playing and really focused on, my weekends were taken up with coaching and things like that. So that was really my story until I started coaching. I was then at Bristol City. I did 4 years at Bristol City, started my own company, did 8 to 10 years with Total Pro Soccer. At that time, after I stopped playing, I was a PE instructor at a special education needs school, which was brilliant, loved it, and it's helped my coaching so much with regards to understanding the environment, understanding how the learning environment can affect learning or performance, and just that understanding of people. So I find it quite funny now. You have someone who's not listening to your every word as a coach, and some coaches get really frustrated. I'm like, just go and do 2 days in SEN school, and it's just, again, it's that perspective and understanding on where's your tolerance level and do you understand. And I'm no expert, but I think just experiencing working in really, like I said, that is an extreme environment, trying to work with children with SEN, special education needs, and some, you might have one person who's got on their file, you have to shout their name or they won't hear you or they won't respond, because they'll be miles away. Think about something else. If you don't shout their name, you won't get a response from them. And then you've got someone in the same class, anything loud and they'll run. And you're like, right, okay, there's differentiation and there's this. Yeah. It's really, how do you manage this? So I went into, I was a PE instructor for three years. At the same time I was running my company, and then made the decision as the company was growing I had to step away from that and really focus on growing it. And a lot of opportunities came our way within schools and within development centres and college program. The St Brendan's College, we run there under post-16 academy essentially. And then 2 years ago, Dave Horton, who was a good friend, who's Southampton 23's coach now, he was in my group coming through at Bristol City. He went into coaching really early and gone off to Watford and so on, and he had recently come back as head of coaching at Bristol City. I was having a conversation with him and he said he'd really like me to come and do some stuff with the strikers, just the under-18s. So I was doing a couple of days a week just with the under-18s in a day. And then following on from that, in 2 years ago now, the ECAS course came about again. The applications were up, and he said, look, this is something that he would like me to consider as part of going on the course. I had to be full-time within a club, and so Bristol City gave me their support through the application process, and I got in and sort of coming to the back end of it now. So yeah.
Okay, so we'll go through some of that because obviously it's quite thorough in terms of that. I've done SEN stuff as well, and similar to you, for me, it's probably one of the best experiences in terms of understanding groups, understanding levels of groups, and pitching accordingly and all that type of stuff. Obviously, you gave a good example there. What other stuff did you learn, kind of being in that teaching environment, that SEN environment, all that type of stuff?
Maybe like planning, having real detailed plans. I was never a brilliant planner, and to be honest, I'm not now. I'm still not, but I've got a better understanding of in certain circumstances why they are vital. Like in an SEN environment, these were all mental disabilities rather than physical, so none of them they were all physically able. But for me, it was like patience, tolerance levels, the other things you have to deal with to an extreme, children spitting or kicking or fighting and with you, and obviously selflessness, knowing that, look, as much as they're hurling abuse at you, they don't want to necessarily be doing that. That's part of their condition, and for me, it was probably more than anything else. Again, was probably that empathy for these kids who you can see a behaviour and you can, as a coach or a teacher, just respond to the behaviour. But if you understand what that child had to go through, you're like, the fact that he's coming to school is an absolute miracle. The fact that he's strong enough to be in a social environment when some of the things he's had to go through, that either his parents or other scenarios, just from their files, once you read the files on why they're actually there at that school, you just think, Jesus, it's, you've got a lot of sympathy and empathy for them. And I think that then in relation to coaching, again, you can have a player who straight away is just being told over and over again he's got a bad attitude, and you just don't know what they've gone through. And for me, my sort of initial take on all the time is, I just don't imagine somebody wants to have a bad attitude. There's usually a reason behind it, and whether it's something internally or externally, or even take accountability as a coach and say, is it something that I'm doing essentially, or something that I can help with? And because of that, I think that's really, really helped me with building relationships with players and understanding behaviour, probably negative behaviours, I would say.
So obviously in your role now, you'll kind of get new groups come through year on year. Is there anything you do in particular to try and get to know the kids or get to know their circumstances or backgrounds or anything like that?
Yeah, so before the first half of the year, I would say, before every session, I'll pick somebody to speak to, just walking out to the pitch, and how the school, how's family life, just to get to know them, and usually someone the other way. So I try and pick two a session, one before, one after, and I try not to make it too obvious. It's just I'll almost speed up and end up next to somebody and just see how they are in general. I think taking an interest in somebody away from just how they performed on the pitch, I think will gain that trust, and then I think once you've got that trust, hopefully they'll open up to you if there are concerns, and two, you'll, like I said, you'll get a better understanding of are both parents at home, or have you got siblings, what are the other pressures that you've got, how are you getting on at school, and how are you socially in the group, in the changing room, and those types of things. So for me, that's something that each year I do and have made conscious decision to do, and I think that's really helped me get to know them. And also at times I'll do the same if there's something that actually correlates to my life. But, that's similar to me. I've got two brothers, and just so that we get that buy-in a little bit. And something I think I'm the only one that does. But on the first review, so after 6 weeks, the first 6 week review, I'll ask the players to not necessarily review me, but give me something that they would potentially like me to change or something that they don't particularly like. And it's, like I said, for me, there's no negative in that. It can be the worst thing as a coach that you would want to hear. Like one person for me said, one person said to me, I feel like you don't praise me enough. And it was like, that was like a dagger through my heart. I was just like, oh my gosh, I hurt so much. And another, we had two boys who were coming on trial, and they said, when you don't use your board, the tactics board, it takes us like 10 minutes to understand. They just come from grassroots, they're under 15s, they've not been in the academy. So I'm talking to the boys who would come up through it and say, right, your side of the diamond, you get to the top of the diamond. If his first touch isn't one that he can play forward, you come out of that space and you go and all the other boys knew what I was talking about. They'd done pre-season, and so it was almost like, oh, don't need the board anymore, they get it. These two new trialists come in, and it was, for me, it was, I didn't take enough care to make sure that they understood. So potentially by not asking that question, they may not have said or felt comfortable enough to say, actually, we don't get it, because they'd gone potentially 6 weeks struggling. And actually it was one of my points, was like, they don't pick up information very quickly, and it's so easy to put it on the player or the child. So that's something they're probably the two main things that I do early on. To
It's quite a powerful way of having the kids give you feedback, in terms of getting that, because like you said, you wouldn't have thought of that. And there's probably coaches all over the country going, you don't take on information, don't listen properly. Where actually it's just, we're new, we don't understand. Or at the younger age groups, I get half the sentence you're saying, but then the other half I'm kind of like, I don't understand what accountability means, or I don't understand what that rotation is, you need to show me again. So that is obviously a real powerful way of getting ownership for them. Do you think that helps your coaching environment in terms of then further on in the year asking you questions, maybe out on the pitch or on the way in?
Definitely, I would hope so, and that's what it's designed for. Doing it at the reviews as well, rather than one-to-one, is that the parents are there, so they've got the comfort of actually a parent. And at times, a parent will say, "Oh, remember when you said this after this training session, and all this was either particularly good, or you didn't quite get this?" And one boy has moved position for a lack of athleticism. We thought actually playing a different role might help him down the line, and we kind of made the decision for him, and almost told. I feel at that point we told him rather than got a buy-in. Now, I think a lot of time you can get players through guided discovery to come on board with what you want, but if they feel part of it, then I think that it's a lot easier. So just small things like that, and actually on an assignment, as part of the ECAS, we have to do a poster on something that we feel will benefit us and our academies. Excuse me. So I'm basing mine on high performance environments. So there's a particular high performance environment model that I'm using, comparing it to the coaches at Bristol City and the environments that we create, and some of this information is in that, and some of the feedback. So it's questionnaires with the players, asking them some real tough questions as simple as, do you trust your coach? And lots of different areas. There's 33 questions that cover 3 different sections, and then off of that, as coaches, we do the same thing but in reverse. So do we do this, and it's sort of yes, no, unsure sometimes. And it's really interesting to see what some of the coaches say or think that they do, and actually what the players overall, how they receive that, and if they feel like it happens or not. And one of the big things for us as a club, or at least the coaches that we spoke to, where I thought we really fell down, was the areas for development we had given the players, rather than them having any ownership within it. I don't think it had a major impact, because there was another question on, do you agree with them? And I don't know, at least 90% said yes. I think it was only 60% or even less than that. Mine was definitely less, maybe 30-40% felt like they had, or they were involved in their areas for development. And I think that's for me, that has to change. That's going to be one of the biggest things from this assignment that I'm going to change. I can't just tell the boys, this is what you need to work on. It has to be, or it should be at least, a buy-in from them, and or a discussion on why you feel that way. It shouldn't necessarily just be a review, right, this is now what we need to work on, in my opinion. And it's not as cold as that. They do have reviews to, we use Huddle, so we've got a lot of clips and things to back up what we're saying, but at the same time I think it's important that the players have some type of say on things that they work on.
It's interesting, obviously earlier on you mentioned about the self-awareness that you have in terms of you've got older. That's probably given them a good starting point. If you're making them critique their own performance and then go, I need to work on this, they're then getting a self-awareness of things they're good at, things they're not good at, which is a lot of a earlier starting point than obviously you would have had. Yeah,
definitely. I think especially players who play in similar positions, I find, and I'm sure you would have, you'll potentially praise somebody for doing something, and so a centre midfielder for a good diagonal pass and put somebody in or something like that, and you'll notice that the other centre midfielder who maybe he's not got that technique to play that pass, he's a completely different type of player, he'll be looking to do it, potentially seeking that praise, and that is another thing I do speak to the boys about really early on, is look, you're all here because you're good players for one, but you've got different attributes. Do you know what your super strength is? Do you know what you think are your areas for development? And at some point when they're younger, this is an opinion, you work on all of those weaknesses as well as their strengths. And once you get older, you'll learn to hide those weaknesses rather than necessarily improving them. So, I don't know, I use John Terry for example. He was never a quick player. He's always slow, but his reading of the game was so good, he wouldn't get too tight, because if he got spotted, he'd never get back in, so he'd always leave that gap, and then as the ball was moving, he would then get tight and use his strength. So it's having that understanding of trying to improve their weaknesses, and then, like I said, as they get older and it becomes more about the performance rather than the learning necessarily, or the process. It's, can you teach them the guile and the strategies within the game to minimise the weaknesses, or just hide them.
So is there an age where you think development for players plateaus off in terms of technical? I guess is the main one where there's a bit of discussion around how old can you keep learning techniques, or to what age does it plateau a little bit? Is there an area you think, or an age roughly, where you think that maybe plateaus off?
I'm not, and I'll be honest, I wouldn't consider myself an academic. I wouldn't consider myself to know all the theory around how children learn and those types of things. But what I would say in general, so I couldn't say an age. I know I've been on courses where they say actually up to 12 is where, is the best opportunity, or up to 12 is the best opportunity for them to take on that information and those motor skills and improve them and so on. But that would be me just copying something I've heard, essentially. And so for me, I think the tactical side of it is much more important at the older end. If you have to still focus on a lot of almost the basic techniques, whether they're ball mastery skills or whether they're passing and receiving skills or ball striking, if you still have to focus on that when, for example, they get to my current age group under 15s, I feel like one, that might limit your tactics. If we're going to play through the thirds all the time, but actually our centre midfielders can't receive on a half turn, or they can't receive under pressure, or they don't know how to, they can't play those switch balls and those types of things. I think it just limits what you can do. So I think as a preference, I would be heavily technical based at the younger age groups. And I know we had this discussion just before we started, but around that internal and external focus of attention. So when they're young, a lot of the time I think they told, this is a skill I want you to try, and this is how I want you to practice it, and this is what it will look like and maybe feel like. And then as they get older, they need to be able to switch between between the two, so they need to be able to follow instructions. Like I said, I didn't do it very well with Danny Wilson. I was told, be here at this time, pass the ball here, and then move here. I wasn't very good at that. What I feel like my strength was being able to assess the environment and the situation in front of me, and make a decision and execute that decision to the best of my ability to help the team and myself. So it's a bit of a long-winded way to say I can't give you an exact time frame, but what I would say is I personally think the younger you start with those basic techniques means that at the older age you're being able to execute decisions, whether it's tactically or not. You're able to execute decisions without thinking about the mechanic of the skill. And I have been looking at some research recently around actually thinking about the mechanics of a skill while making a decision may affect the decision, or may affect the execution of that decision, if that makes sense. So if I can hit a drill pass over 50 yards over and over and over and over again in a technique setting, so I don't necessarily have to think about the mechanics of that skill. When I make the decision to do it, I'm just focusing on the run of the player, and I know my technique will get there anyway. If I'm having to think about my technique doing it, it might be so my perception goes, or my decision making goes, or something along those lines.
So obviously you mentioned before you were quite young when you went into Bristol City. Mm-hmm. What was your process in terms of skill development at those younger age groups? Was it just at Bristol City? Was it a local club as well? Was it schools? How did that?
So so back then it was different. You could play in an academy or centre of excellence right up until I think it was under 14s, and after under 14s you had to stop. So our school, we didn't play many school games. We didn't really have a school team, but I played for grassroots teams, sometimes two. So probably up until 14. Most weekends I played at least 2 games, sometimes 3. So sometimes I play Saturday morning for Bristol City, then I'd get in the car, go and play for Southampton, for example, and then get in the car and play on a Sunday for Avon Athletic, or along those lines. So I played lots of football in different environments. I didn't play many other sports, so I wasn't playing rugby and anything else really. It was just football. And for me, it's a funny one because I hear lots of people say, like, to be able to excel, you need to sort of love what you do. And actually, that could be an argument why I didn't necessarily go any further than I did. But I liked football. I knew I was very good at it, and that was what kept me going, probably. But I didn't love it. I love football now as a coach. Now I do. But as a player, it felt to me like anything else that you're good at, and so you just keep doing. And so I find it interesting now when I hear you have to love it to be able to excel or make the next step or make it, whatever that means to you. I do disagree with that. I don't necessarily think you do. I think it's the same like any industry. If you're good at something and you work hard enough at it, you can still succeed. And it's maybe when the things go wrong, are you going to keep doing it if you don't necessarily enjoy it? I think there has to be some type of enjoyment, but I don't think it has to be as far as you have to really, really love it.
Did you have other stuff in and around football that you really enjoyed? Other hobbies or anything like that?
Not particularly. I really don't. I think it's just, so I realised like other people in the team would talk about all these results on the weekend, and they'd be able to tell you who won the FA Cup in this year and 20 years before like we were born and things like that, and this happened on match of the day and this, and I would watch football if it was on. It just wasn't, it was for me, it was another thing that I did that I enjoyed, but I think that a lot of that enjoyment came off the back of keep getting told you're good at this you keep getting man of the match, you keep coming home with a trophy, and I think that was what my motivation was at a lot of time. It just wasn't that I loved the sport, which I'm now sort of trying to maybe work out what did that mean and maybe overthinking it, and it's only fairly recently I've on reflection realised that but I definitely wasn't mad about football.
So you mentioned you're like a flair player at the time. Were you like flair as in creative passing, finishing, or was it dribbling, or what type? How did that manifest itself?
So I was fairly big, like physically big, and I was always being quick. But I always wanted to try something different. I always, so when I was young, I had a finish that was like my finish, which was just an outside of the boot finish across the keeper, almost within your stride. So limited back lift. Got no idea where I got it from. I just knew, I could just remember, picture it now in like 7-a-side tournaments. That would be my go-to finish, and it used to impress people. They used to like it. But I always used to work out ways of, so even really young, like no-touch turns. I can remember thinking, I think I was just a thinker. So I think, this ball's coming into me. If I don't touch this, and he misses it, it's a straight foot race, and I'm always going to get there first. So I think I just really would think about different ways of getting the outcome I was looking for, whether it was a finish. So I was always a good finisher, but I think that was more through creativity and practicing different things, whether it was a chip or I remember like Romario, see him do a toe punt, and I was like, oh right, and I never perfected it, could never get it right. But I'd always think about, actually, my coach is saying this is the standard thing to do, but I think I can come up with something better. I think I can do something different. But I think that was me. That wasn't just in football, that was me naturally. I was quite a creative thinker. I think in school, try and work out different ways to do stuff, bending the rules. So in games, if the coach wasn't really specific on a rule, I would work out what bit was missing. So yeah, I would always find the loophole to work it out. So I think that was a natural thing. It wasn't, like I said, it wasn't planned, but so it was. I couldn't do sort of all the skills in the world that you see some of the kids do now, but it was just like a. It's hard to explain. I was trying to think back.
Being different, like being different to the norm almost.
Yeah, it was that.
And did you play against? Did you say one older brother or two?
One older brother, and I've got a younger brother.
So did you play against them a lot? Like at home and stuff? Would you play a lot of football in the street with those two or not? Not
really. My younger brother's 10 years younger, so that was 2 young. My older brother's 3 years.
Score a lot of goals against him.
Yeah. But not particularly. Like I said, we had quite a small garden. Actually, we smash a basketball at the window, and don't know how it stayed there, but it did. And Mum would go mad, and so we would, but not necessarily in a really competitive way. Like I said, our garden was probably too small. It was like, it wasn't grass or anything like that, so we couldn't do too much. What I would say is my dad was always really supportive, and he would take us over to St George's Park in Bristol, and they had like a little court in there, and I remember times when there'd be like men playing over there, and he'd be like, oh, do you want to play against these two? Like, have a 2v2 with like some grown men, and he'd be like, okay. And then we'd go and just like rip them apart, and they'd be like, what's going on? What's going on here? So that was quite funny. And
so that's quite a good way. You talk about creativity there. If you knowing that if you just do the norm against a man, more likely than not, they're going to be able to step across or run you and stuff. So those are probably times where you're going to need that creativity in a situation like that to do something different. Because if you do what's expected, more likely than not, you're going to get found
definitely.
Back,
and even if I could, so like I could kick, if I wanted to, for a lot of years, I could kick and run and score loads of goals. Yeah. I just didn't necessarily get the same satisfaction as doing something slightly different, and I think that was where I got my challenge almost.
And did you practice a finishing a lot, or is that again something that just came more natural?
Not away from the centre of excellence or away from school and things like that, but when we did, or if we had finishing sort of topics or where it was, that would sort of get me going, and I would then have a real good opportunity. And again, we always played a game, so like I said, in my own age group, a lot of it physically, because I was physically dominant at a young age. I'm not now. I stopped growing up at 14, and that was it. Become a small player. but it was just something that I would always try. Even if it didn't come off, I'd keep trying something, like I said, slightly different anytime I had an opportunity to. But at home we didn't, like I said, we play in the garden, but that was just smashing the ball as hard as we could, really.
So then obviously you mentioned kind of you've gone through that age doing really well, kind of not really too much of a rocky road approach, if you like, progressing. Then you got your chance within the first team. Can you just explain to us kind of how that came about, how you found out, how you felt kind of walking onto the pitch with that type of stuff?
I had played, so it was 60 to 71 days. I remember it really, really well. I think it was 25th of September. So if you think, just become a scholar. So literally I'd been in school till that July or whatever. Started pre-season. I think I played 2 reserve games in pre-season. I think this was the first League Cup game. I think it was. It was Nottingham Forest away. I can remember Marlon Harewood was there, and that was like a big. Oh my gosh, he was like a man back then. And it was, you're going to come and you're going to travel with the first team. Okay, for me, I wasn't expecting to be involved, so it was just, it'd be nice. Like, my brother's going, it'd be nice to tag along with him. And then it was, you're going on. I was like, oh, okay. Really wasn't expecting that, and really nervous then at that point, because I was just so chilled. I thought, there's no way. I've played 2 reserve games. I've just come out of school. There's no way he's going to put me on. It's like, right, you're going on. And I was like, oh, okay. So then, as much as I was like, it was a shock, I don't think I had enough time to really process everything. And yeah, just went on and ran about, really. Couldn't tell you much from the game. Regards to, I think we lost the game 2-1, but I can't. Couldn't give you too much information about anything more than that. Just was really, really surprised to get the opportunity. And then going forward, my nerves kicked in more, because now it's like, oh, you're travelling the first time. Like, right, okay, I'm gonna make sure I'm ready this time. I'm gonna make sure I prepare and things like that. And I think a few weeks after, we had like Bristol Rovers at Ashton Gate, and I came on in that game, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Again, it was never. You don't expect that when you just become a scholar. It's not something I think you could. No matter how well I was doing, the players I could see who were in and around were my position, who are obviously much older. I was thinking, it just doesn't happen. It had never happened before, and so, like I said, once I made my debut, it was amazing for the family, amazing, probably for the academy as well. But I didn't feel sort of additional pressure. I didn't feel like I had made it. I don't feel like it changed me. I didn't become like big time or anything like that. I still had to go to college and do all your other stuff, and but the big thing for me, I noticed that a lot of the things that I got success with didn't work, and I feel like somewhere along the line, I feel like I should have been taught. Even though I was creative in myself, I don't think I was taught the real detail of going from essentially a target man to a small, like now number 10. There wasn't a number 10 by then, it was big man, little man, but the equivalent of like a number 10. And that's definitely helped me now, only because when we have big physical athletes now, I'm sure you probably would have seen the stats within academies, and the first quarter, if there's making up, I don't know, something to do like 75% of the boys in academies, but when you get to the Premier League or league football, actually it's even across the board. Now, most people I speak to speak about actually giving the smaller, say, technicians or later birthdays, and however that manifests itself, more time, because more of those will come through and even out. And as much as I partly agree with that, I think I use the word neglect. I think we neglect the big, strong, fast players. I think we neglect them technically. and I think we allow them to get success now using those things that won't give them success when they're older, and they get this scenario like me where actually I couldn't use my physicality, my creativity would help me succeed, but I needed to know properly how to hold the ball up. I was never taught how to hold the ball up because I was a big physical player until 14. I didn't need to. I just pinged someone and it stopped, then now I had to make double runs to have a yard because I didn't get pushed off the ball. And it's something I really think about now. It's in helping those players now who have those physical attributes, and they're getting loads and loads of success and scoring a hat-trick every game, but trying to explain to them this is not going to be how it looks in 3 or 4 years' time. It's quite difficult because they've always had success that way, and you're almost trying to change their game now, ahead of time. But I think when you do get a buy-in, I think that it might actually change that trend of those early maturers, or what you want to call them, coming through. I think if you support them and challenge them more to look for different ways to get success, you might actually see more of those, that percentage still going towards that way in the professional game. It's just a hypothesis of them.
I guess what's interesting is you mentioned playing up quite a lot. You said you played up age groups, but if you're still physically mature or capable in the age groups above, that still isn't challenging you.
Yeah,
you'll get a bit more of a challenge, but it still might not be enough to make you change what you were doing. And you were saying you stopped growing at 14. It's only a 2-year period between you being able to do pretty much whatever you want, whatever age group you're playing in, to playing against full-grown men at 16.
Yeah,
and being around the first team, which isn't a long time to be able to work on double movements, receiving on half turn, details of pin and roll in.
Yeah,
against bigger players and that.
And at that point, it was once you get into a first team environment, I think it then becomes what's going to get us a win on the weekend. It might, that young lad we've got who can't hold the ball up, every time he plays into his feet, it keeps losing it. It's, yes, we can, how much time are we going to spend on that when as a manager, I've got to keep my job. I need to win. I need to play the players who, again, at that point, who are going to follow my instructions to the T, rather than do their own thing. So I can now think, looking back, like again reflecting, you think he's not holding the ball up very well. He's doing his own thing slightly with regards to not necessarily sticking to the team plan. Like, he probably just couldn't trust me to execute his plan, his tactics. And so I completely get it. I completely get it now. But it's something that I think as coaches, or just for me, I'm aware of, and I try to really help with, and I see myself being, off the back of the TCAS course, I see myself being a striker stroke attacking coach more than an age group coach. The problem I've got is that's not really a thing yet, but I'm as certain as I can be between 3 and 5 years most clubs will have them.
I think, well, I love NFL. Now they go ridiculous lengths. There's a guy at the LA Rams whose whole job is to pull the head coach back off the pitch, which is a bit much. But the level of detail they're able to go in, they're broken down into like quarterback coaches, quarterback mechanic coaches, position, unit, attack, defense. Like, I think there's something that football will go towards, just because it allows you to work more with those players, and also it allows coaches to obviously have dialogue around stuff and probably upskill themselves within a coaching room, which I think is only going to benefit the players for sure. Yeah,
definitely. It's something I'm working on at the minute. It's for my ECAS, what they call a North Star, is to be an expert striker coach. Haven't specified what level that means. It doesn't have to be first team. I want to really help them, and I think that's how I can do it best from my experiences and things like that. Really going through that process of being a big, strong target man to then being a small player. And how do you? How can you change a game, or can you change it that late? Like, are there certain things that should be happening earlier on? And I see it now in academies weekly. And boys, keep giving it to him and just keep running behind. You think, okay, I get it. It's getting him success today, but is that our role as an under-15 coach to make sure they get success today? Is performance the most important thing at this age? Scoreline, or is it challenging that player who's scored 3 goals because he's run over the top each time? Not stopping him from doing it, but thinking, are there other ways that you can do it? Because as soon as you come up against somebody as quick and as fast, what are you gonna do? Have you got other tools in your box to still get success?
The top teams now, like defenders, if you look back 15, 20 years, you have more immobile defenders who would go around kicking and heading people and stuff. Look at the top teams now, like Varane and Ramos. Both athletes. Gomez and Van Dijk, Liverpool, both athletes. They're not going to be run really easily. It's not going to be a case of, I can just run in the eye. And they'll go, well, no, I can match you in that, and I'm probably a little bit stronger. So you're probably at quite a good age to be able to affect those lads. At that 15 age, you're seeing the physical development and going, actually, you predicted height, this is what you're going to be. You're not going to be bigger and stronger than everyone forever. Kind of, we need to work on these areas. I guess kind of the last thing before I let you go, because I know you've got to go across to work and stuff. Actually, sorry, I've got 2 more bits. In terms of going into the England setup, how was that going into that environment? Obviously, I imagine, again, a proud time for family in terms of being able to play for England and all that type of stuff. How was that for you going into that? How did that call up come about and all that type of stuff?
So there was an under 14 World Cups, I think, is that right? In 98, I think it was. And we went across there, so I can't tell you how I got picked for that. I've got no idea. I got a letter through the post saying you've been selected for the 5-a-side World Cup in France, which you won. It was like, that was amazing. So I'm trying to think who was in there. So Jermaine Pennant was in that same team. I don't know if you recognise any other names. So we did that. So I think my name was sort of on the radar before the under 15 trials, and essentially it was a trial process. So it was a Southwest trial, then it became a South trial, and then a national trial. And they picked for the Victory Shield. They picked a squad of 30, I think, and then they rotated that squad throughout that season, and then it became more of a one squad moving forward. So I played the first 2 games. I played against Wales in the first one and scored 2 goals. So that was, for to my family, it was amazing. For me, it was great. But I think I was quite a little bit orthodox back, really. Like that. That's an arrogant saying it, but it was. I didn't really feel that nervous, sort of playing for England. Not as much as I did like playing for the first team or anything like that, which was only a year later or so. Excuse me. But it became interesting through the process of those years. So, and again, that was when, like I said, things became a bit more challenging for me. It was seeing other players. If I'm honest, I think a lot. What helped was the fact that I was in and around the first team, especially like 16s and so on. It was like, if you're playing for the first team, surely you're gonna have an opportunity. Then other players, so I don't remember, like Stephen Moore, who was at Aston Villa back then. He was coming through, and then we started to see like under 17. So I see younger players coming through. So I think like Glenn Johnson was a year below me, and then what was sort of spiral nail in my coffin was Darren Bent started flying. He was a year below me, and so I came out, he came in, and I never got back in again. Essentially, so I think I've played. I don't think I played. Not sure if I played 18s or not. I think I played 15s, 16s, 17s. But amazing times. I look back on it so proudly, but it was very nonchalant about it. Like I've got next to no programs. I didn't get any shirts signed. I've got shirts, but I didn't get any of them signed. Like it was just, great. I'm going to England. Yeah. And now looking back, I'm like, God, imagine all the players you'd have played against and all the, like, names that you recognise. Like one, I've got the video of it. We played against Tevez at Wembley, and I didn't until, I don't know, a long time after that, I realised I didn't know who Tevez was. I think I just watched it back years after Tevez was Tevez. So hold on, did I just say Tevez? So there'd be many more of those scenarios from programs that people have played against and stuff who just had no idea, because I just
looking online. Obviously, I know during one of the tournaments you were at, Portugal had like Quaresma in their squad at the time. Which, It's crazy, really, when you look at it. Like just people that played in Milan, won Champions Leagues, all that type of stuff.
It is a bit crazy looking back, but like I said, at the time it was great. I played 22 games, I scored 11 goals. I was just, for me it was an amazing time, but something that I didn't really, I don't want to say I didn't appreciate, because I did appreciate it. I was grateful for it, but it didn't seem like a huge achievement at the time.
I guess the one positive, and I've said this in previous episodes of podcasts, is having that kind of nonchalant attitude probably does allow you to be a bit more creative, because if you're so uptight all the time and worried about ramifications of going, if I mess this pass up, I'm going to be getting dropped, or that type of stuff, doesn't allow almost that freedom. And if you're quite a creative individual, you probably need that freedom of going, just getting the football will be alright.
Yeah, and I feel like I had the opposite for the first team. After a while, I became terrified of playing for the first team. It was almost like, right, you're going on, you're just like, oh my god, this is like, it was, and it was that focusing on everything, thinking, right, make sure you don't lose this first pass that comes up to you, get hold of it, and you overthink it, and what they say, paralysis for analysis, essentially. And I was doing that internally, and I feel that really affected me. I look back now, I think, potentially with like a psych team and stuff like that, just to get through that, or at least be able to process what was going on. But then would have made a huge difference. But I look back on to where I am now, and this was like supposed to happen. It might be my way of dealing with it, but this was supposed to be in my journey. I was supposed to get those experiences early on to pass them on to people now. And I'm sort of happy with that. I don't look back on my time being released at 21 and going through I don't see that as a negative at all.
And having coaches, like obviously there's a lot of great coaches up and down the country working with kids. Having coaches that have better understanding of that type of situation or that mindset is only going to help, hopefully, us produce better rounded people, and then obviously hopefully better players as well. Yeah,
no, definitely. Playing's not a good enough reason to be a good coach, and I'm not one that you have to have played to be good. I think having a mix, though, like anything, the more broad or varied the team, the different experiences, I think the better you'll be. So I think having somebody with player background, great. Having an academic who's got all the theory in the world, and you sort of merge, brilliant as well. Having someone who's played at some professional level or come from potentially another sport, all those things, I think you can all bring something to the table, and that's what will give you a really rounded program.
Good. And this is the last question before I let you shoot off. And I've asked everyone this, except for Tom, which I need to go back into. But who's the best player you've ever played with or against, or coach you've worked either under or with or against, and why?
Okay, best player I've played with, I'd probably say two. No, I'll pick one. The best player, so I was playing Bristol City, was Tommy Docherty, because I couldn't work out how he was so good, and he had no pace, like none. And being the type of player I was, and that being a lot of how I got success, I'm just like, how does he not lose the ball? How does nobody run him? How does he was a pure technician, his lads in the academy now, but off of both feet, he could tackle, as I said before, he could just do everything he had, and I just could not work out how we do sprints, and he'd be so far behind, and then we get on a pitch and you'd just be like, and again, it's that what I was speaking about potentially hiding your weaknesses. So I would say him, mixed probably with Brian Tinian, who just coming up, I just don't know how he didn't give the ball away in a possession practice, like we do possession practice, and I still don't think I've ever seen him give the ball away. And I just can't. It used to genuinely, when I first got on the first team, I just used to be like, you don't give the ball away, like, ever. I just couldn't get my head around it, and because it was a very different skill set to me, I think it was much more impressive. And coach wise, manager, I would I'll cheat and do two. Chris Ramsey, who's now QPR technical director or something high up there. He was probably more of an inspiration than necessarily the best. I don't really remember so much around any technical detail or tactical detail he gave me, but having a black manager then, this was in the England setup, I can remember just like whenever he spoke, I would just like hang off every single word, and it was almost like and now as a coach, he's someone who I look back on and be like, he might have had a real big impact on me, even like wanting to coach. If that makes sense.
Almost knew you could.
Yeah, and that was, and I look at him and I want to go, and I'm planning to go up at some point and have a go and speak to him or do an interview or something with him around some stuff. But he was a real inspiration to me, and I would say effect on me wise, Bobby Gould. Just the confidence that he gave me to go and play was I was 19. I think it was League One then, League Two, and I just felt $1 million every time I went on the pitch, just through his support. Yeah, he just instilled so much confidence in me, and again, that without that experience, I don't know if I would feel like I could potentially do that to others. I would think their confidence would have to come from their own performance or whatever. Mine didn't. I wasn't playing at Bristol City. Stepped in the door. He said, "I've seen what you do. Love it. I just want to see the Marvin Knight team playing in the reserves in my first team. You're going to play the next 5 games." And of course, there's more to it than that in training. It was, give the ball away, keep doing it, don't stop doing it. We need that in the team. That's why I've got you there. And just felt so positive, and from it, no, what do you call now? Psychological safety. I had no worries about going to him, speaking to him. I knew it would never be a negative. I think that environment, I would love how I felt in his environment is how I aspire to make my players feel with me as a coach.
Listen, Marv, I really appreciate your time. I know you're busy.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
It's brilliant. Cheers.
No worries.
Thanks for listening to the Sports Initiative podcast with me, Michael Wright. Please remember to follow us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram at the Sports Initiative Podcast, and share this podcast with friends and family. I'll see you next week.